How can I tell whether I'm sharing deeply to connect authentically or using vulnerability to earn worth and avoid feeling alone? My friend, I've got a book recommendation for you. Right down there, in the bottom of the screen. I'm joking, but I'm also not joking, because to answer this question, you need to understand the world of malignant self-love. This is Sam Vaknin's Bible on narcissism, which also means that we need to understand the dynamics of codependence and fundamentally the trauma bonding dynamics of being a deep thinker who's actually looking for trauma-based connections, and you are going into the deep thinking topics way too quickly, way too undiscerningly. You need to understand the world of narcissism, and you need to be willing, at least as a thought experiment, to try on the possibility that you are indeed an attention-seeking, trauma-bonding, narcissistic man or woman. I'm not labeling you as that. I'm playing around in this video. You can tell from starting the video with a joke. Please put your trigger pants to one side, and we will just have a serious discussion about how to not constantly form trauma bonds by just opening up way too quickly and unfortunately having a bit of covert narcissism, or some would even say being the vulnerable narcissist. By definition, loosely defined admittedly, the vulnerable narcissist is someone who leads with the card of authenticity. They lead with the card of authenticity. They lead with the card of emotional, empathic conversation. But the reality is they just want what Sam Vaknin would call narcissistic supply. They want the conversation to go back towards them. They are leading with basically the equivalent of a trauma striptease. You're saying, hey, here are my wounds. Here are my wounds. Here are my wounds. Let me see your wounds. Ooh, those are some good wounds. What about my wounds, though? Oh, yeah, your wound. Yeah, your wounds. But what about my wounds? And you keep taking off layer after layer of persona and various ego masks, and then guess what? You are there getting all the attention, all of the feedback, all of the trauma-based narcissistic supply. It is actually, dare I say it, a pretty common thing that most of us do from time to time unconsciously. If you imagine being in a conversation with your friend and you're sharing something that, is kind of mundane, maybe you're talking about how work's going, one of you may say suddenly in the conversation, hey, I actually want to talk about something that's a bit more vulnerable. They use the V word. They just bought out the V card. If you're a good friend, you're not going to say, hold on, my friend. I want to go back talking about the sales and I want to talk about work again. You don't do that. You say, something vulnerable. Okay, get your buttons ready. You're ready to talk about something vulnerable. Something happened a few days earlier and you've got your own vulnerable thing that you can't wait to share. He's sharing the vulnerable thing. You're about to share the vulnerable thing, and guess what? You both bonded over the vulnerability. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, but look at the dynamics going on beneath the surface. In a mundane conversation, where you're talking about maybe more superficial things related to work or career, or maybe updates about how the children are doing, one of you pulls out the V card, the vulnerability card, and you just give in a bid to take the conversation to a deeper level. You're going to share a bit of your woundedness, a bit of your trauma, whether that's from this week or something that you realized about your childhood. If you've got a friend who's into inner work and shadow work, maybe this is a normal dynamic between the two of you. You make the bid for depth at the detriment of sacrificing the current conversation. In some cases, that is the best move possible. Not everyone needs to be talking about work and family and what's going on at school and what's going on in the local community. Sometimes it is deeply refreshing and genuinely nourishing to have a deep inner work conversation, and you talk about childhood trauma dynamics, or you talk about addiction and overcoming and recovery, or you talk about some kind of spiritual wounds, some kind of religious trauma. That can be deeply healing. I built my entire channel around these conversations. I'm not boo-booing the idea of meaningful chat. Please don't get me wrong. I've made hundreds of videos, 300 plus videos talking about traumatic things, mainly traumatic things. I'm trauma bonding with you, perhaps. But, I'm giving an example here of two friends who've got a historic relationship where they know they can switch between mundane reality and vulnerable, authentic, trauma-based reality without choosing either or, and they have the ability to go in and go out and not get exclusively focused on the heavy, deep, traumatic material. Unfortunately, this tends to not be the case with someone who's trying to form a new connection and pulls the V card a little bit too early. You need to understand the psychology of codependence to truly understand where this goes. I mean, there's a variety of information in Charles Whitfield's, again, equivalent Bible to Sam Vaknin's Narcissism Bible. This is Codependence by Charles Whitfield, I believe, from the 1980s. There's a fantastic diagram here, table 5.5. Some characteristics of healthy and unhealthy narcissism, and one particular point stood out for me for the sake of this video. This is how the narcissist sees others. The unhealthy narcissist versus the healthy narcissist. They're different terms, but for the sake of this video, I assume you understand that healthy narcissism is basically something that has more or less mature ego functioning. It's useful and real and normal for everyone to be a little bit narcissistic, but the unhealthy narcissist is what a variety of YouTube videos will be talking about when it's narcissistic abuse, narcissistic this, narcissistic that. The healthy narcissist, someone who's appropriately self-involved, will see other people as separate individuals with their own needs and feelings. You have healthy narcissism, for example, you have a healthy narcissism around your own trauma journey, your trauma healing journey in particular. That's yours to hold. They're their own person. They may or may not be interested. Doesn't really matter. You see them as distinct. The unhealthy narcissist, who's more codependently attached towards forming a bond, a trauma bond, some might say, sees others primarily as how they can be useful to them. That is the quote. There are a few more there you can pause and see on the screen between healthy and unhealthy narcissism. Hopefully that comes up. You've got a few more seconds to screenshot this. I recommend you bring up the book for yourself. I'm trying to hold up a mirror. I'm not going to make this a convoluted video. You will know in your guts if you have basically, like today's questioner, reached a moment where you're somewhat confused whether you're being authentic or you're actually playing a bit of a game. You're not being authentic, but you're rushing into the trauma striptease a little bit too early, and you're feeding off the energy of swapping childhood stories. You're feeding off the energy of assessing ex-partners for their narcissism. You're feeding off the energy of maybe sharing the rock bottom moments from an addictive relapse. There is healing and there is connection in two people coming together who are trapped in worlds of superficial conversations at work or at home, and they finally get this moment to talk about something that really matters, a deep, meaningful conversation. They bond and they connect. The test of whether or not that is a trauma bond is their ability to be able to disentangle and have their individual, separate lives and also entertain different conversations that aren't related to trauma and trauma healing. To not just bond through pain and negativity, but also to be able to have conversations about hope and potential and dreams of where the future could take you. A classic example of what tends to happen at various parties or social functions, someone who's in the too deep, too soon category, is that everyone else is having a celebration. And you're the kind of person, guilty as charged, I used to do this in all of my teenage years. If you're someone for some reasons watching who knew me, decades ago in my teenage years, if you knew me back then, I'm sorry that you knew this version of me. I was the guy, even as a 16-year-old, who would be at the party, and rather than let's all just gather our first experiences of getting drunk together and smoking some things and maybe kissing each other or who knows what might happen, I had to be the guy who would, in the smoking area, rather than just lighting up my cigarette like a normal 16-year-old and looking at the girls that I might want to kiss that night, I had to ask people deep, dark questions about the point of it all. I couldn't help but do it. I was that guy, and I was that guy more or less until I left university and I realized, oh, wait a minute. I can just, silly me, I can just enjoy the party. I don't have to bring my inner world into the outer world all the time because I am shitting on the mood. I used to do that. For years I used to do that, but unfortunately, I didn't really have any better options. It literally wasn't a possibility inside of me because I was so dense in my trauma energy that the inner world was always constantly leaking out. I was the deep thinker. I was the existential edgy man. And now I still am an existential edgy man. I professionalize my existential edginess. And look at me, Mr. Persona with the deep psychology books, and look at all the hundreds of pages that I've read. But it's different. It's different now because I can turn it off. I can form connections with people. My neighbors, for example, my neighbors are in their midlife. One neighbor's around 60, the other neighbor's in his 50s. I've got other neighbors down there, men and women who walk their dogs I see in my local walks. And I can just chat to them about what's going on in the environment, what's happening with the weather, whatever thing they brought up about their personal DIY project or what their son or daughter's doing, and I can just have my normal face. I can bond with them and form human-to-human connections without needing to bring out the vulnerability card or trying to test to see if they want to do the trauma striptease with me. Unfortunately, transparently, as I've mentioned in a variety of videos, at this stage in my life I seem to have something of an aura of a therapist, which means that as soon as I just stand in proximity to someone, they eventually start telling me about the problems in their life. I've mentioned this before. I just have that presence. I've become too much of this that I'm basically there, and it seems to energetically pull out of them. That's okay, because I notice that it happens. People see that I can listen. I don't interrupt them. I ask at least one follow-up question about whatever they shared. And they've got the trauma beneath the surface. But I also know how to put up the boundary and then not let it get too deep because it isn't a professional context. That's the other side of this video. If you're making a bet to stop being Mr. Quickdraw or Mrs. Quickdraw on the vulnerability card, you're buttoning yourself up and no longer doing the trauma striptease. You also need to build the ability that when someone else pulls out the card or starts to do the tease, you can hold a boundary of, you know what, I'm sorry that happened to you. That's really tragic. Have you read a book like this? Have you read a book like Codependence by Charles Whitfield? And they say, no, but you don't understand the way that he was treating me was horrible. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I haven't got the time for this right now, but maybe in the future we could talk about this if you actually want to talk about it. Or you say, I'm so sorry, I've got to go and do this thing for this thing. I wish you all the best with that, but really do go and read this book. You offload it. Offload the bid for connection, because the bid for connection isn't necessarily a real bid for connection. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. If it's someone you've got a historic relationship with and there's trust, you might have some extra energy to give that day, and you can entertain the trauma bond conversation and not share too much of yourself, not get the roots connected, you know? You can do a bit of that. But if you genuinely don't want to, don't allow the conversation to go very far. I've had moments like this over the last few years where I've been at the gym and people have known that I do the work that I do. I'm trying to do pull-ups, I'm trying to do muscle-ups, I'm trying to do some heavy farmer walks, and between sets as I'm resting, got that presence of I am who I am. I'll be sat, it's happened countless times. I'll be tracking something on my phone, I'll be tracking the reps and sets, and I'll put it in here, and I'll look up and, oh, hey Tim, how's it going? And Tim will say, oh, no, not bad, Jordan, just trying to, you know how it is, just trying to get the cardio in. I go, oh yeah. Anyway, I'm going through a divorce. I'm like, oh, fuck. Shouldn't swear on these videos. Try not to swear because the algorithm, thankfully I muffled the swear. They're like, oh, you know what? It happens all the time. It's a bid for connection. They are being authentic. I'm not saying they're not being authentic. I'm not saying you're not being authentic when you're in that trauma-y moment. But, consider the consequence of forming many different connections from the foundation of trauma bonding and excessive vulnerability in inappropriate situations. And don't be surprised that several months down the line, when you maybe have healed some of your wounds, you've read books like Codependence, you've gone into malignant self-love and the world of the narcissist, and you've more or less moved beyond your own trauma wounds, that you suddenly find that you are now playing therapist with all of your friends and family members. You no longer have the energy of, I'm in pain, please help me out, and I'm going to lead with this because I'm being authentic. You've healed that. Let's imagine 6 months from now, 12 months from now, you've mainly healed that. You've dealt with the problem. But because you formed connections with people who bonded with you around those conversations, you're a few steps ahead. They're realistically maybe one step ahead, or in many cases, unfortunately, people don't do the reading. People don't take an active effort to improve their lives and heal the past. They are exactly where they're at, more or less. Guess what? You're a stage above, they're where they are. You earned this through conscious inner work. You are now in a position where energy needs to flow towards them, and you are going to be bid after bid after bid of attention coming your way. They will want the energy, and unfortunately, you'll then find yourself in a situation where you have to either take distance, or in the most extreme circumstances, cut off friends and connections, because you can no longer play therapist, because you either have to play the game of, I show you my trauma, you show me yours, and your conversations go that way. It's one-sided monologues, and you go back and forth, and you bond around the energy of feeling like you're doing something. But if you're not playing that game anymore, guess what? The connection itself becomes very, very difficult to manage. You've probably been there, right? Just pay attention to some of the connections that you have right now. If you're excessively trauma-based and depth-focused at the detriment of more mundane life activities, or especially the golden shadow, aspirational, lighter side of things, if you can't talk about dreams and visions and aspirations and the way things are going well in your life, and they can match that with their dreams and visions and aspirations and the way things are going well in life, if the branches don't connect and all you've got is the trauma roots beneath, you have not got a thriving forest of friendship. I will say that again because it's ridiculous I came up with that analogy. If the roots are connecting, but the branches do not touch, you have not got a thriving forest of friendship. You have merely got an underground network of trauma-based moles sniffling around in the dark and bumping up against... I shouldn't film these videos at 2:30 a.m. in the morning. This has gotten quite ridiculous. But you know what? It's my channel. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm trying to add humor into a video which is very triggering. It is not nice for anyone to think, I am the narcissist. I'm the narcissist. I'm the covertly narcissist. I've been doing this for years. I've just been trauma dumping everywhere. I realistically just count down the clock in the conversation until the moment when I get to share what happened to me because my mom or my dad or what's going on in my relationship. Every single time, whenever anyone gets close to me, I'm just ticking down the clock until I get the moment to share about the thing that's hurting me. I'm not doing it right. I probably should take it to a therapist or a coach, but I'm offloading it to my friends. I'm caught in the world perpetually. That kind of realization, if you're having it now in this video, isn't nice to swallow. It's a very, very bitter pill. So I'm trying to play around with a bit of humor and a bit of theatrics to just, treat it with the lightness that it also deserves. A genuine shadow work moment, a genuine reflection of an unconscious behavior will cause feelings of distaste and displeasure, but it can also be held lightly. I've been there myself. It's why I gave the example of me being the edgy 16-year-old who can't just smoke my cigarette and look at the girls who are pretty. I have to ask them about whether they're really fulfilled, whether they're really going to get on the path of, I don't know what I was doing. I can't quite imagine. Probably wasn't quite so sophisticated, but it felt like I was really sophisticated. It felt like I was being deep and authentic. Reality is probably a lot of eye-rolling and, save it for the library, Jordan. This is a party. Can we just dance and have a good time? Not happy memories. Just make sure that your connections in this moment, today, if they're falling on the narcissistic side of things, unknowingly, unwillingly, or willingly because you're playing a game, like today's questioner, how can I tell whether I'm sharing deeply to connect authentically or using vulnerability to earn worth and avoid feeling alone? If you're already asking the question of, am I sharing at excessive depth to avoid feeling alone, you are using another person. And you're hooking them in with a high-stakes conversation, which most people, unless they're therapeutically trained, have great difficulty in shutting down. My dog walker acquaintances in my local area, if they were to share with a normal person who isn't therapeutically trained about the problems in their marriage, it's very likely they'd be fed on the supply and then their problems would go into this person's problems. And that's what happens. Normal people chatting about problems is just like they share each other's problems and they just do this, but it's not necessarily the problem solving or the therapeutic containment because they're not professional therapeutic figures. When I have someone who tries to do that to me, I can exit the conversation in still a more or less compassionate way and give them a feeling that they were held, even if I didn't give them an hour of my time. It's the end of the video. Are you a deep thinker or an attention seeker? Have you realized that maybe you're somewhere in between in certain circumstances? You are, in other circumstances you're not. Leave a comment down below, and if you are willing to be honest, it will be a much more interesting comment section for you to lurk. You've probably already lurked down there, realistically. You're one of those people who clicks on a video and then you scroll immediately into the comments and look at the top comments, and then it's like 40 seconds into the video, let's scroll back up. Guilty as charged. I do that as well. But I'll see you in the comment section, and I look forward to reading those honest confessions, and maybe we can all be a little bit less authentic together.